Hello everybody, I've got a bit of a treat for you guys today. A lot of people have been saying to me how much they enjoyed the reading of chapter 2. And I thought, how about I do another one? And this time I'm going to go back. And so I don't need to set this one up at all because it's the very beginning of the book. This comes from chapter 1 of Out of Atlas, book 1 of the Halfmark Chronicles. This book, which was written by me. So, here we go. Chapter 1. The Walls of Atlas. Fred Banks straightened his waistcoat and jacket, flung open the front door, and was at once confronted with a grim view of the walls of Atlas. It was a short walk to his school, St. Wulfians, and nowadays he took to spending the majority of it with his hands deep in his pockets to guard against pickpockets, and staring up at the walls. We didn't always have them, his uncle once told him. Once we were peaceful, happy, free. Until, yes, the marauders. The marauders. He'd heard whispers of them through his childhood. Before knowing the meaning of the word, he knew to shiver at its mentioning. No one knows where they came from, nor why. Just that they came carrying swords, burning and pillaging wherever they went. One by one, the free cities fell, and Atlas would have followed suit had we not had the wherewithal to build walls to hide behind. Fred couldn't count the times Uncle Paul had told the story, nor fathom why with such frequency. Once was enough, right? The effect was a deep shudder whenever he saw the walls. They towered to block up the sky. No thought of archery given them, save the legion of gargoyles which pocked both sides, long spears in their hands, and mouths wide enough to swallow the world. They terrify the marauders, Uncle Paul loved to say. Those stone scarecrows project visions into their wild minds, and thank goodness they're just stone, Fred thought, pulling his blazer tighter at the sight of one. Hey, watch where you're going, yelled a man in a top hat, snapping the reins of a horse-drawn carriage. Fred ripped his eyes from the walls. He'd wandered into the middle of a cobbled street. Oh, sorry, too late. With a hyah, the horses were charging off again. Papers, get your papers. On the corner of Herald's Way, a boy in a flat cap and drab cotton shirt was forcing newspapers on passers-by with such fever, Fred wondered if they might be burning his own hands. Meanwhile, a tide of bowler hats and petticoats were passing him by. Fred frowned. The boy, probably just a few years older, had been born here, and, if he was anything like the rest of Atlas, would die here too. This smoky city was a beehive of markets and dusty streets, a scrum of hectic people living hectic lives, and none of them, to his knowledge, had ever questioned the walls about them. Taking the last turn, he reached the black wrought-iron gates of St. Wulfians, a gas-lit lantern adorning the head of each post. Damn! Why did parents have to be seeing their kids off today? He locked his gaze on a gap in the crowd and elbowed his way through. Not today. He wouldn't think of them today. Ruth met him on the other side with a cheery "Hello!" "Morning," he mumbled. She glanced at the crowd behind him, and her eyebrows folded in understanding. He loved her for that. Ready for a bit of history? Sure. Moments later, Mr. Beverins clapped his hands together and strode before the class. He was a slim figure in a brown tweed suit, scarlet tie, and polished burgundy shoes. Spindly little glasses sat on the end of his nose, while a centimetre of white hair covered his head with a thin strip curving round his jaw. "You have 20 minutes, he said. 3 centuries past, Duke Aldermathra theorised that emptiness is the natural human state. To what extent do you agree or disagree?" Pens rummaged their way out of bags, dove into inkwells and zoomed across pages. Mr. Beverins, the old chestnut, had been teaching history at St. Wulfians for well over 35 years and, as far as Fred could work out, had always been old. The two exchanged a smile, and Fred returned to his paper. His first lonely paragraph was staring up at him, begging for company. Ugh. 2 rows down, Ruth's pen was running relays from left to right. He put down his pen and gazed around the room. Mr. Beverins's classroom. Most professors jammed their room with a full encyclopedia of trinkets confiscated from students, shelves of large tomes set to fall apart under the weight of their collective dust. Not so with Mr. Beverins. His room breathed and dreamt history. It smelt of the stuff. Paintings and tapestries arrayed the walls. Even a full-length sword hung above his desk. One particular painting drew his gaze. Why had he never noticed it before? In its centre was a gigantic man in a golden suit of armour. Roaring out of the chestplate was an enormous lion, and hair seemed to erupt from every part of him, each strand the same fiery gold as his hazel gold eyes. So shone this figure that all about seemed dim, save the golden sword which struck at the burnt sky above his head. Fred's lips parted. Was it him, or was there more than brushwork there? It was the eyes that did it. He sensed they were taking him in, reading him to a trembling depth. He struggled to find the word. Profound? Majestic? He knew the right one as soon as it passed through his mind. Kingly. But who was he? He'd never seen anyone in Atlas like that. Could he be one of the marauders? No, Mr. Beverins would never celebrate one of them. Yet, if he wasn't from Atlas, or beyond the walls, then where could he be from? Who was he? So captivated was he, so engrossed, that he never noticed what Mr. Beverins was doing. The professor's aqua blue eyes were watching him in turn. And that look, what was it? Not judgment, more of a probing attentiveness. The wrinkles along his cheeks stretched tight at the presence of a smile. Then he clapped his hands once more and brought the class back to attention.